Okay, and a major twist of irony, had everything recorded in our A3 class, was saving it, and somehow erased everything. So we're starting over during our prep period to make sure you guys have this to study with over whatever time you want to. So we're just going to go through this page by page and make sure you guys understand what the expectations are. Number one, make sure you are marking your text, guys. It's going to help you out immensely in solving all of these, and make sure that you answer everything that you are supposed to. On the practice test, we've even given you a little cheat sheet by telling you how much each question is worth, and we'll kind of go through how those points are broken down as we're doing this video as well. So our first one, Paula's rule. Count the number of seconds between the seeing the lightning and hearing the thunder. For every 5 seconds counted, the storm is 1 mile away. So those are our two numbers. Based on Paula's rule, which of the following tables shows the relationship between the number of seconds counted and the distance of the thunder? So that should give you a big clue. First off, I need time in the first column, distance in the second. And when I look at the totals, it's 5, 2, 1. Our first one, they started at 0, 0. But then my next entry is at 5 seconds and 1 mile. So we automatically know there's our answer. Just to check the other ones, the first one, it said 1 second, 0 miles. We know that's wrong. The second one, it says 0 seconds, it's 1 mile. Nope, it's not on top of you at that point. And D, it's 1 second and 5 miles. So they reversed the numbers. Be careful on that. The correct answer for here is answer A, because it is 5 seconds in 1 mile. That question, just 1 point. There's really not any work to be shown on that. So relatively simple. Shouldn't take you too long. Turn the page. Number 2, Mrs. Brown needs 8 eggs in order to make 2 cakes. What is the total number of cakes she can make with 24 eggs? So they didn't give us any additional guidance on this one, but I'll be honest, as soon as I see this, first thing I think of is a tape diagram. So I'm going to start off with our 8 to 2, realizing we always do our tape diagrams in simplest form, which is going to go down to 4 to 1. So for my tape diagram, I'm going to have 4 boxes, then 1 box. And the 8 is eggs, the 1 is cake. Don't forget to define your variables. E is my number of eggs. C is the number of cakes. Now that I've got that, I know that it's 24 eggs. So I know that my top line equals 24. I have 4 boxes, so I'm going to divide that 24 by 4. Gives me 6. So I know that this is my ratio constant. Once I have the ratio constant, I put it inside of every box. And I can now see with only 1 box of 6, she can make 6 cakes. There's our answer. So you'll notice number 2 is actually worth 2 points. You get 1 point for getting the correct answer. You get 1 point for showing your work. So I chose a tape diagram. If you chose a ratio table, but you need to have something here to show your work. If all you have is an answer, sorry, you've already lost half credit on that point. You're only getting 1 of the 2. So you've been warned. Make sure you show your work. Number 3, Brian makes $5.50 for each hour he babysits. How many hours will Brian need to babysit to earn the $22 he needs to pay for a new Xbox game? There's our question. Create a ratio table to answer the question. Now, they have given us specific directions, so make sure that we follow them. If you wanted to do the tape diagram, you could. However, you'd still need to make the ratio table. So personally, I would just start with the ratio table, since that's what the question is telling us we need to do. Do not forget, the first column in my first row in my columns is my labels. So in this case, we're talking about how much money he's earning in how many hours. And our first entry is the $5.50 for 1 hour. It's going to make it $11 for 2 hours, $16.50 for 3 hours, $22 for 4 hours. I've now found the $22 answer, so I'm ready to answer my question. Brian needs to babysit for 4 hours. there is our answer. So this one, you'll see 3 points, 1 for the answer, 1 for your work, which includes showing how I built this table. So make sure you've shown your work on this. And that also does include the labels. So the 1 point for everything on the outside of the table, basically, and then 1 point for everything on the inside of the table being correct. So that's your 3 points for number 3. Number 4, Mr. Rowley has 16 homework papers and 14 exit tickets to return. Ms. Rivera has 64 homework papers and 60 exit tickets to return. For each teacher, write a ratio to represent the number of homework pages to the number of exit tickets each has to return. So for each teacher, write a ratio. That means that we need to have 2 ratios on here. So we'll start with Mr. Rowley. His numbers are 16 to 14. Please don't forget to simplify. That's where your 2, 3, 5, and 7 come in. I can divide both those by 2. That's going to give me a ratio of 8 to 7. That is now in simplest form. I can't divide both those by 2, 3, 5, or 7, so I'm done. For Ms. Rivera, her starting number is 64 to 60. Again, looking at my simplifying, I divide both those by 2. That's going to give me 32 to 30. I can actually divide that by 2 again. That's going to give me 16 to 15. At that point, I can't simplify any further, so I am done. Just as a side note, for Ms. Rivera, if you noticed on that first numbers, I could have divided by 4. Congratulations, you got there in 1 step. But please start getting used to this 2, 3, 5, 7 check, guys. As long as you will check all 4 of those numbers, you will get there. And honestly, sometimes it's easier. Because 64 divided by 4, I probably would have had to do long division anyway. But if I just do it by 2, I can do that one in my head. Part B, are the ratios equivalent? That's actually one of the easiest questions you'll ever get, because we've got the answer right here above us. You just have to answer. In this case, it is no, they are not. Why do you only have to do that part? Because part C is explaining our answer. So here's our explanation, and this comes from the definition of equivalent ratios. They don't simplify to the same value. Because in simplest form, it's not the same thing. That means that they are not equivalent. Had they simplified to the same one, which on the test they may, just a hint or a warning, don't assume that they won't. Make sure you're doing all the work. So this one we have 4 points. Should be relatively simple. 1 point for Mr. Rowley's, 1 point for Mr. Rivera's, 1 point for understanding whether or not they are equivalent, and 1 point for your explanation. Now within the 2 ratios that you've written, make sure you simplify or you will lose a half point off of each. If you didn't, so you'd end up losing one of those 4 points. That brings you down to C level work. So please simplify. Next page. The table below shows the ratio between the side lengths of a rectangular octagon and its perimeter. Nice, they gave it to us. One big problem on this one that was throwing a lot of students off as we were working on this in class, and that is the fact that this is not just an additive table, because they skipped from 4 to 9. That means you must look at this from a multiplicative aspect. Remember, when looking at it from a multiplicative aspect, I always start at my initial entry, and I figure out what I'm multiplying by to get the line in question. In this case, if I'm going from 1 to 9, I'm going to multiply by 9, meaning I now need to multiply this 8 by 9 to get 72. Coming back to my initial entry and going to the next line, they've skipped again, so now I'm going from 1 to 12. How do I do that? I multiply by 12, so I now multiply the 8 by 12, and I get 96. So, part A, what are the missing values for A and B in the table? There's our question. Part A is 72 inches, and point B was at 96 inches. So our work up top helps show us what those 2 values were. Write an equation that you can use to solve for P, the perimeter. So there's our task. Remember, these equation guys are so simple, you should smile. I'm starting at the P. They even told me where to start this time. I didn't have to guess at all. And I'm going to the S. So P equals, the first number I hit as I came underneath was 8 over, the second number I hit was 1, and my other variable was S. So don't forget to simplify where we can. 8 over 1 can be simplified to S. Part C is now using that equation you just wrote to answer the following question. If Gabby wants to make an octagon with side lengths of 20 inches, how much wire does she need to go around the perimeter? So there's our big question, how much wire does she need? But it said we need to use the equation we had just found. So this should be relatively easy. It's P equals 8S. That S, we have now been told, equals 20 inches. So I'm going to substitute that value in. P equals 8 times 20. That parentheses means multiply. 8 times 20 is going to give me 160. Don't forget to answer your question. So Gabby needs 160 inches of wire. And there's our answer. So what's our point breakdown on this one? We have 5 points. You have 1 point for showing your work up here and getting your answers. 1 point for each of those answers. 1 point for your equation, and 1 point for the correct answer on the perimeter, substituting that in. So a total of 5 points. Next page. Now we're up to number 6. Apologize for the typos on this one. Miss McSham made it. I proofread it and didn't catch it, so that's on both of us. But during the summer vacation, Liddy liked spending time with the grandmother picking blueberries. They decided to make blackberry jam, but we'll call that blueberry jam for now. Her grandmother said that you must cook the berries until they become juice and then combine the juice with the other ingredients to make the jam. Use the table below to determine equivalent ratios of cups of juice to cups of blueberries. So here's our task. We need to use this table. So they gave us the blueberries and the juice. One difference, we have not done a whole lot where we started you with the 0, 0 in a table. Just be aware of that in just a moment. The rest of it kind of makes sense because here I was going up by 4, meaning on this side I was going up by 1. So our next entry could be 3. The problem is we then go to 6. So I can no longer look at this as an additive value. So I need to figure out how did I go from 1 to 6 and need to look at this now as a multiplicative value. Here's why this is important. I have to use the first number that has actual values. 0, 0 is not really values because that's its starting point. The first value I see is that 1 to 4. So to go from 1 to 6, I am multiplying by 6, meaning I now need to take the 4 times 6 to figure out this entry over here, which would now be 24. Just as a record, if you wanted to look at this third line, multiplicatively, you could do that as well. So it could have been just times 3. Sorry, I did 4 times 3 to get 12, 1 times 3 to get 3. Okay, next one. Write an equation that models the relationship between the number of cups of berries, we're just going to use that, and the number of cups of juice. And we're actually going to probably have you do 2 of these equations on the test. So just a heads up, that question may modify a little bit. So this one, though, specifically said berries to juice. So I'm going to start at the berries, go to the juice. But again, with that 0, 0 one in there, we need to make sure we go to the one that has values. So I'm going to start at B equals, the first real number I get is a 4 over 1 times the J. That can again be simplified. So we'll call that B equals 4J. Going the other way, if I start at the juice and come back this way, our J equals, the first number I hit is the 1 over the second number, this 4 once again, times my other variable, which is a B. So there would be the 2 equations that can be built off of this. Now, use the equation to determine how many cups of juice were made from 12 cups of berries. Quick hint on figuring out which equation to use. when I want to find something, cups of juice, I want the one where the variable is by itself. So I need the J equals 1/4 B equation, because they have now told me that my berries is 12. So I'm going to substitute that 12 in for the berries. 1/4 times 12 over 1, because I need to make that whole number a fraction to multiply. Now, 1 times 12 is 12. 4 times 1 is 4. Then I can finish simplifying. 12 divided by 4 is going to be 3. So my final answer is 3 cups of juice were made. Okay, and this question is actually continued on the next page. So part C, use the equation to determine how many cups of berries are needed to make 6 cups of juice. So this is where we now need that other equation. That's why we probably are going to change that, because you're going to have to write them both anyway. So we may as well give you credit for it. So my other equation was B equals 4J. So I now copy that one over here. B equals 4J, because I'm trying to find how many cups of berry. Again, I want that variable by itself. I now know that my J equals 6, so I can substitute that value in. B equals 4 times 6, or 24. Just as a side note, this parentheses you keep seeing me use, that is another way to write multiplication. So our final answer on this, you need 24 cups of berries. So on this one, number 4, we see that this is actually worth 7 points. So we had a lot of things going on in here, right? So we get 1 point for showing our work. We get 1 point for each of the values that we had to add into the table. So that's up to 3. We get 1 point for each equation. So that's points 4 and 5. Point 6 is answering this one correctly. Point 7 is answering this one correctly. So that gives you 7 points just for that one question. So you guys can see, I mean, that's a big question for our test. Our next one, circle the best approximation of dollars Jack will earn after working for 9 hours. So 2 issues on this one. 1, we didn't finish off your intervals. 2, we stopped the line at 6. So your first task is going to be using a straight edge, a ruler, a book, another pencil, something to make sure that you're actually drawing a straight line as this continues up. Because you're also going to need to be able to draw a straight line up from the 9 to see where it intersects on your line. So in this case, we can see it actually intersects just before we get to our next interval, which if you look, it's going up by 4s, meaning this next one is 24. So for our example one, it's 1 before the interval, making it 1 before 24. The answer that matches up with that would be 23. So the correct answer on that for the practice test was answer B. Okay, our last page. Daniel got 4 out of every 5 questions correct on a recent multiple choice test. If he got 64 questions correct, how many did he miss? So that's going to be our eventual question, but we're not going to answer it right off. We're going to start going through the process. So what is Daniel's ratio of questions correct to incorrect? Now there's a little one to make sure you're reading the problem, because they gave us 4 out of every 5. So they gave us the total. They didn't tell us how many he got incorrect. We need to figure that out, but it shouldn't be hard. If he got 4 correct and there were 5 questions, that means he got 1 incorrect. So your ratio is 4 to 1. And it may help you to put in the description. That would be correct to incorrect. Because if you write down the description as well, it'll make sure you're doing the right numbers. Next, draw a tape diagram to represent this ratio. So now we're being specific. You have to do a tape diagram. So our tape diagram, we're going to have 4 boxes on top, 1 box on the bottom. And we know that it's correct to incorrect. So identifying our variables, C is the number correct, and I is the number incorrect. Finally, if he got 64 questions correct, how many did he miss? So now we're finally ready to answer this, or we have everything ready to. Now we can use this number here, 64, for the correct and put it into our tape diagram. So I know that that top line equals 64. I also know it has 4 boxes. So I'm going to take my 64, divide it by 4 to find out my ratio constant. It's going to give me 1, gives me 2, bring down the 4. It's going to go 6 times. Subtract 24 gets to 0. So again, I've now found my ratio constant for my tape diagram. So I can now put that number inside every box inside of my tape diagram. Now in this particular instance, there's only 1 box of them, so I know that my incorrect is 16. So I can now answer the question, he missed 16 questions. And that, guys, is your test. So this last one, 3 points, pretty straightforward. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. The biggest ones you're going to miss on, make sure that the numbers we actually give you are in simplest form. If not, you're going to need to simplify them or you'll lose points there. Make sure on your tape diagram you've labeled it and that you have your variables identified. And then for the actual one, it didn't say you had to use that tape diagram, so if you did a table or something else, that's fine, but we need to be able to see your work somewhere. Don't just throw an answer out there. Okay? Good luck, guys. Hopefully you'll have plenty of time to repair. Please make sure you ask to come in and see us at seminar if you are struggling with this at all.